Sono Alberto Barbera, direttore del festival, sono qui per darvi il benvenuto, augurarvi una buona giornata naturalmente, ringraziare il nostro main sponsor Cartier. Se dovessero chiedermi qual è lo sponsor ideale per un festival cinematografico non avrei assolutamente dubbi. Cartier è sicuramente il partner ideale perché non è soltanto qui per promuovere il proprio marchio, ma è qui per collaborare a costruire attorno alla mostra e con la mostra una serie di iniziative, diciamo così, culturali di grande rilievo, come gli incontri che sono stati programmati lo scorso anno e che vengono ripetuti quest'anno. Questa mattina c'è il primo dei due incontri che, raggruppati sotto il titolo unificante di The Art and Craft of Cinema. Sapete che questo primo incontro è dedicato a un colloquio fra Damien Chazelle e il suo musicista, collaboratore abituale Justin Hurwitz. Non voglio rubarvi tempo perché so che siete qui per ascoltare loro, non me, però prima vi presento il CEO di Cartier, Cyril Vigneron, che ringrazio ancora una volta per la sua straordinaria collaborazione.
Grazie Alberto. I will continue in English. Il mio italiano è poco peccato, l'ho dimenticato tutto, allora è meglio che continui in inglese. And today's conference will be in English, and there will be another one on Monday, it will be in Italian. So as Alberto has said, we think that our presence here as a sponsor should not be only to come and do red carpet and having some endorsement of people who do not need us in their fame, and we don't need either, but to bring to the festival and to Venice other dimensions in culture and in event, and in other part also some links, and like today links to music, but also masterclass, and there's some music starting right now on the first row, which shows that everything is open. Last year was the first time masterclass, and there were a very interesting participant with Alexandre Desplat, Soleray, and Andrea Moricon, who first talked about this interesting link with music and composition and how it goes in the process, and we'll be doing the same thing today. It's an occasion to inform you about an important event that will come tomorrow night in La Fenice, where Soleray has created a program together with Alexandre Desplat with a theme which is very interesting by itself called Ciao Casanova. And in her case, the inspiration process came, what can we do in Venice? And so there is a character, Casanova, and the seducer that can be very much linked to Venice, and linked also to the cinema, and of course to Fellini. But there have been some other also, like Truffaut, who has gone in this direction as well. And in today's world, the character of seducer is very controversial, of course, whether seen positively, like James Bond, or negatively, like some other people, of course, in cinema or in music, Don Giovanni. But there are many examples that are kind of put on the stage in this way. So how this can influence music and how to prepare a program from Mozart to Desplat can express this theme. And then after that, how to put some images to make a format that can be a movie, an opera, a concert, and all of them together. And we think it's part of our mission as a cultural actor to encourage artists when they have projects that goes beyond their traditional boundaries. There is an architect called Liz Deller in one of these art dialogues who say, I claim the right for every artist to go in an area where they are absolutely incompetent, and we should encourage them to do so. In the Fondation pour l'Art Contemporain, David Leitch or Kitano Takeshi were exhibited not for cinema, but for their photo, for their music, for their drawings, for what they do. Damien Chazelle, the film director, but also, I think, drum player. He's also a musician. Churchill was a politician, but also a painter, and a rather good painter. So we should not put people in boxes, especially not artists. And when they have projects that they really believe in, usually we're in a world which is very much risk-averse. And say, let's go to something safe. Let's make the replica the number 2, number 3, number 4 of a movie that has been proved and successful. And we tend to have something driven by box office, where we see the same of everything, everywhere. So if we have a role to play, is to encourage the originality of creation, to value creators, those who do things, whether musicians, whether photographers, whether film directors, whether actors, actresses, and to encourage them in this big discovery, individually or collectively. So that's what I say, in a world that is driven by big companies and studios, but going to mainstream where everyone looks the same, a world that we can come of a competition, that everyone tries to do the same as everyone else. There is a role for taking risks, encouraging artists, going through their own fear, and help them to give the best of themselves. It seemed that for Damien and Justin, when they worked on La La Land for years, they had difficulties to find studios wanting to make such a film. And after it became a big success. And so usually the things which become the most interesting are those nobody believes in them until they realize it's genius. So I think we are all here to celebrate cinema, to celebrate music, to celebrate two great artists, and to see that the process of creation should not go to safe spaces and lands and shore. And also the film festival here has been taking risk, but after 8 years has become to one of the most established, because it didn't go on the safe path, neither of glamour or only on part of critics, but think a bit of what the world can bring from everywhere. And I have to congratulate what we have done in this thing. Before seeing these two big gentlemen talking, there will be short videos summarizing their career. So now we'll move on the other side, and I will let you listen, watch, and then see them talking about what they have done. Thank you.
Thank you.
La tecnologia è così, vedete, ogni tanto ci sono degli imprevisti. Direi, saltiamo questo passaggio, no? Altrimenti rischiamo di rimanere qui in attesa chissà quanto. Vi presento Damien Chazelle e Justin Hurwitz.
Buongiorno a tutti. I'm Stéphane Lerouge. I produce the soundtrack series Écoutez le cinéma for Universal Music France, and Cartier and La Mostra asked me to host this talk. We are a bit disappointed, you know, because of these technical problems. Can we see the clip now? Yep, 1 second. Otherwise, Damien will mime the clip. If he wishes. No?
Yeah, maybe let's try to play it.
Okay. So let's start the talk if you wish, because we are a bit rushing. Damien, may I call you Damien or Mr. President?
Damien.
Damien. I don't want to do a protocol mistake, you know.
No.
How did your vocation for both cinema and music come about, you know, and why did you finally choose cinema?
Cinema came first, and then, you know, music sort of almost came into my life as a separate thing that ultimately wound up, you know, intersecting. But I didn't start playing music. Well, I tried lots of instruments when I was really young, but sort of in an abortive kind of way. And I didn't really find an instrument that I stuck to, which was drums, until maybe I was about 10 or 11. But by then, you know, I'd sort of been totally kind of immersed in movies or whatever I thought movies were at that point. And then drums sort of took me down. into a kind of rabbit hole for a while. And so I played music for a while, and that's actually how I initially met Justin, was through music. But movies were always my first love, and I kind of knew, I think, in the back of my head that I would make my way back to them. I just didn't know exactly how.
And Justin, what about your vocation? Was it clear for you to become not only a musician, but also a composer?
Mm-hmm. Well, I had been taking piano lessons since I was about 6. And I went through phases where I really liked it, and I went through phases where I really didn't like it. And sitting there and just playing the notes right over and over, trying to get the notes right, just wasn't my favorite thing to do. But when I started actually writing music myself, which was about when I was 10 or so, my parents got me a synthesizer and this little box called a sequencer, which in the mid-90s was a box that took a floppy disk and it let you layer tracks from the synthesizer. I think you could layer like 16 tracks. So I would, just make my own music by layering things from the synth. And I loved that in a way that I never loved practicing the piano. And the hours would just disappear, and my bedtime would come and go, and I would still be up in the middle of the night doing it. And I think I recognized that was a sign that I loved that in a way that I didn't love just practicing the piano. So I kept taking piano lessons until I was 18 or so at the end of high school, but I think I recognized that I was a lot more passionate about writing it than I was about playing it.
Yeah. And do you remember the day you met? Was it really kind of friendship at first sight?
No, Justin was auditioning musicians for. So I met basically, like someone, trying out for a part, and this guy was, lording it over me, deciding whether I was a good enough drummer. Right? I mean, I'm not making this up. Right?
No, I guess that was the day we met. I remember when I called you.
Because you had heard I played drums.
Yeah, I was looking to start a band. It was like the first week of freshman year of college, and I was looking to start a band, and I was just asking people, are you a musician or do you know a musician? And I got this tip that there's this incredible jazz drummer who had won all these competitions in high school named Damien. Somebody gave me his phone number, so I just cold called him, and you picked up.
Yeah, and then I showed up, and then you were like, oh, yeah, we're going to put together this band. We're doing a little band rehearsal, and I show up, and there was another drummer there. And I realized then that I had shown up for a tryout.
Yeah, I forget if I had, our friend, who's still a friend of ours, we saw him like a week ago, D.A., I forget if I had been introduced to D.A. first or second, but I somehow, it wasn't by design. I think drums were the only thing where we had 2 people come in. Because I had met one drummer, and then met another drummer. I was like, oh no, now we have 2 drummers, so we got to pick one.
Oh yeah. You pretending it was.
Yeah. You came in, you did like a drum battle or something with him. You guys actually like.
Yeah, I did win the spot, but then he became the singer. So in a way, it's like he got to be the front man. So maybe he won. But it all worked out. Anyway, so we were in a band together for that was kind of the beginning of our. Knowing each other, friendship, et cetera, was this college rock band for a couple of years.
And the name's band was?
Chester French.
Chester French.
We went through several names, though. We changed the name about once a week for a while.
Yeah. But eventually it wound up that, yeah.
So maybe La Mostra di Venezia and Cartier next year will produce here in Venezia a reunion concert of Chester French.
Yeah, that would be.
No, Damien, you told me once that there was a very strong emulation between both of you. I mean that Justin, for instance, made you discover the classical repertoire that you did not know till then. Brahms, Mozart, Bach.
Yeah. Well, Justin was studying, well, obviously he came from that background too, but he was also in the music department at school, so we started rooming together, and I just remember...
If they have it.
He would be composing, sort of, we'd be sharing a room together, so I'd be sort of off in one corner, he'd be in the other corner, and was always composing.
You were writing screenplays, I was writing music. So the second year of college, we became roommates. We weren't roommates the first year, we became roommates, and then we were just like cooped up in a small room. You were writing scripts, I was writing music.
Yeah, so it sort of began organically like that. And yeah, exactly. So Justin was, I guess you were sort of composing in the more in the classical style, and which I really didn't know anything about. And then I'd be sort of playing pieces of jazz or things like that that I'd sort of grown up playing to Justin, and it became a little bit of an exchange program between us.
So in 2007, your studies at Harvard ended with a first long feature film. You were, 22 at that time? 22. So let's imagine for Damien and Justin, it's more than a first film. It's like a birth certificate, and the film's title is Guy and Madeline on a Park Bench. Fingers crossed.
It happened at dawn, happened in this park. A guy and girl had dallied till the moon was gone. Then it sprang, and up the moment came the suns to blame their love. Happened at dawn. They'd met the night before the water shore. He played his horn across the park. And so they strolled and spoke of years of old, back when the folks would dance in the dark. They found a place to sit where all the lamps were lit. Their fingers grazed, hands almost touched. So long. Then the sun arose and split the mist. The guy and girl, they stole a kiss. It happened at the break of dawn. Right at dawn. She slipped through his hand, she felt like sand. She wondered if her face was sweet enough. He dove in, he kissed her with a grin, but wondered if his lips felt too rough. Then the sun began its morning run, the fountain won. They thought it might be time to take a chance, start a new life with a new romance. Yes, all that fades away, that's what folks like to say. But these two kids, they knew that line was wrong. When they said their love would stay alive, would grow until the day they died. It happened at the break of dawn.
Damien, for years, you thought that musicals were not able to express deep emotions like realistic, or let's say more realistic films. How did you change your mind?
It was sort of a sudden, what in French you'd call a kind of coup de foudre with when I saw The Umbrellas of Cherbourg for the first time. Obviously I'd seen many musicals before that, and so it's not like I hadn't encountered any of the sort of other great classics of the form, but for whatever reason, I think the genre itself had just always deeply annoyed me. That I sort of would be following the story, getting into the world, and then these people would just start singing for no reason. It really pissed me off. And then, so Umbrellas of Cherbourg, I saw that, which of course, you know, in some ways you could say the trick of that movie is that there never is a transition between singing and not singing. The whole thing is sung, which at first really, really annoyed me, because, you know, I've sort of, at least with musicals, normal musicals, I felt like at least there's some scenes that I could bear, where people would just talk like normal. And Umbrellas of Cherbourg, you know, if you've seen it, I mean, it just begins with immediately singing, and you start to realize really quickly, at least I did, to my horror, that the entire thing was going to be sung. And so I had this very weird experience of sitting there just kind of cringing for the first 10 minutes, 20 minutes, but I sort of forced myself to continue through, and then bit by bit, almost like a weird chemical reaction, something happened. And by the end of the movie, I was just a complete mess. And I couldn't figure out how I'd gotten so sucked in, what had happened. I think, you know, my hypothesis now and then, I guess, was that something having to do with the marriage of music and cinema and the purity of how it was done in that film broke down the normal barriers that would separate me from the characters or from their emotions. And I just felt completely sucked in a way that normal cinema couldn't do, into, in that case, the lives of this, you know, these two kids, you know, played by Catherine Deneuve and Nino Castelnuovo, and so I think from that moment on, it just kind of struck me that there was something more to musicals than I'd given them credit for, and then that prompted me to go back and watch musicals, and I found my whole outlook had changed. Now, when I went back and looked at, let's say, more traditional musicals that would transition between singing and not singing, instead of being annoyed by the moments where it would break into song, I'd be energized by it. I actually appreciated the defiance of it. It felt like actually this was a form of avant-garde cinema, of kind of rules-breaking, defiant cinema that only cinema can do, but within the sort of rubric of kind of populism, of things for a mass audience. And if you look at some of the great Hollywood musicals, American in Paris, things like that, you really see that kind of experimental avant-garde streak, but within the most accessible genre, and at the time, the most popular genre there was. So I just got, I made up for lost time and became a total addict. And then I sucked Justin in my nefarious schemes.
But Justin, you today with 15 years of insight, what do you think of your score and songs for Guy and Madeline? You know, because that was your first recording experience, and you told me once that for some budget reasons, you had to record in Bratislava.
Yeah, we had 1 4-hour session in Bratislava to record all of the music, all of the songs and score. For that, which now, you know, doing movies in LA, we don't have like the most luxurious schedules, but you get many days, and you get to book studios and listen to it, come back and try it again, and to go through everything in 4 hours was pretty wild. Now looking back, everything was 1 take or 2 takes. First take, they're sight reading it. The second take, it's a little better, and then you have to move on. That's pretty much how it went. And it was the first time I had ever had my orchestrations played by musicians. So I had been studying it. I had been writing it on paper for my classes. I would go in. First of all, at Harvard, they made us write it not just on paper, but in ink. They wouldn't even let us use pencils. There was some philosophy of it. If you make a mistake, you have to, I don't know, you have to white it out, and it's harder for you, so it makes you think more, maybe. Maybe that was the idea. But so I was doing it all on paper, never heard it played. This was the first time hearing it, which was really exciting. I remember literally jumping up and down on my toes like as they started playing the first piece, and the engineers were laughing at me. They thought it was, I was so excited. But there were also a lot of problems. There were a lot of things that didn't work how I thought they would, or I just hadn't thought through the practicality of it. Things like where the musicians are going to breathe. You know, I hadn't thought about that. I just write lots and lots of notes for the brass and hadn't thought about how they're going to actually play that. Or range things where I'd read in an orchestration book, a French horn can go to that note, but in practice you might not want to, or you might not want to jump to that note, or you might want to not jump from that note to that note because of the valves and all this stuff that I just didn't know about or hadn't thought through. So there were a lot of issues and things having to fix things on the fly. So I listen back to the music, and I'm very proud of it. I hear a lot of mistakes. That's true with all of our scores, by the way. When I listen to La La Land or the last thing we did, I'm hearing the things I wish I could go back and do a little differently or do a little better. I think that's just how I am. But especially with that score, since we were so new at doing this, I hear a lot of things that very rough around the edges, but I'm also very proud of it. And I was looking through the orchestrations a couple of years ago, and I saw things that I almost felt like I was thinking, I don't know if I would have thought to do that today. So even there was a certain naivete when it comes to the technical side of it, but I think there was a certain inspiration as well, and there was a certain spark that, because of that age or because of that newness to it, that certain ideas came, and then I was looking at it and almost got a little sad, thinking about, wow, I don't know if I would have thought of that really interesting choice at this moment now, at this age, with all the experience.
You know that Damien's second film made discover his cinema really worldwide. It's both a punch, it's both let's say, a musical film, of course, and a psychological thriller. And I don't think it's necessary to mention the film's title.
Oh, my dear God. Are you one of those single-tier people? Do I look like a double fucking rainbow to you? You must be upset. Are you upset?
No.
No? So you just don't give a shit about any of this?
I do give a shit about this.
Are you upset? Yes or fucking no? Yes, you are upset.
Yeah.
Say it.
I'm upset.
Say it so the whole band can hear you.
I'm upset.
Louder!
I'm upset.
Louder!
I'm upset.
You are a worthless, friendless, faggot-lipped little piece of shit whose mommy left daddy when she figured out he wasn't Eugene O'Neill, and who is now weeping and slobbering all over my drum set like a fucking 9-year-old girl. So for the final father-fucking time, say it louder!
I'm upset.
Carl. Start practicing harder, Damon. Whiplash, bar 125, big boy tempo, 5, 6, and...
I'm upset. Could you just, both of you, explain how the music works in that specific scene? I mean, the two layers. Damien?
Well, I mean, it's I think Justin will probably be able to speak more specifically to it, but I hadn't, I mean, just looking at it now, because I haven't seen the film in so long, I'd forgotten to what extent seems like it's sort of built on two parallel tracks that are kind of not always in sync. There's the diegetic material, which is basically him playing his drums, practicing his drums, a lot of which is just live sound. Pretty much everything you hear there is that there's no post-dubbing of the drumming. That's just Miles in that scene. And then there's Justin's track, which, and again, you'd think the normal, I don't know, just think of what Justin was saying about Guy Madeline. I sort of have a similar feeling looking at this, where I don't know if I would have thought to have a different drumming track over, it's one thing to do an ambient bed over that drumming. That seems more like something that I would think to do today. But to then have this kind of other drumming track that, of course, by necessity is going to be completely out of sync and not in tempo with the on-screen is interesting. I think it works. I like it. But it's sort of, I'd forgotten we did that.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on at different tempos. So there's the two drum tracks, of course, and then there's some of the pulses, dum, 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 dum,
are
dum,
not in tempo.
Also at different tempos, and
yeah.
all of that. Really the dramatic score, we made it out of, it's all big band instruments. They've just all been manipulated. And
We just used to be more inspired.
yeah, we had,
Discovering.
yeah.
We'll get it back. It's okay.
You are going to remake your films.
It's like, it was all big band instruments that we like slowed down, stretched, detuned, did things to keep it sort of in the same world, almost like a twisted version of a big band. So it'd feel almost like I thought of it as like a twisted sort of big band music sort of swirling in his head, like a very dark, twisted version of the music he was studying and playing. So yeah, lots of little quotes and interpolations of some of the tunes from the movie. Some of those cues have that.
Where do you play that little fragment of the theme? What is that played on?
Which
when you're pushing in on Miles in the beginning, that's the only thing that it sounds. I mean, it sounds to me like a synth or a Fender or something, but it's
the little thing is dibba 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 that thing.
No, the theme.
Oh, the piano. That's the piano.
But you've processed it.
Yeah, it's been processed. It's been it's been really thinned out,
okay.
EQ'd, and then most of the stuff is a little bit out of tune. Everything is a little bit out of tune with the other instruments. Yeah.
But Justin, do you have? How do you live this very special moment? I mean, when you submit your ideas, your proposals to Damien, do you have a kind of stage fright?
This one was I remember we had so many conversations before we ever got to like showing any music. We would meet at Starbucks like every single week, and we talk about. I remember we were meeting a lot. You were writing the script, or you had written it, and we were starting to talk about what the sound of, obviously the on-screen music would be these standards or things that sounded like standards, but when it came to all the dramatic score, what could it be? And we just went through a lot of ideas. We talked about, orchestral score didn't make sense, not for this movie. An electronic score seemed weird for a movie about musicians and instruments. So we started talking about, well, how could we record real instruments and then process them and do things to them to make them feel kind of electronic, to give you the feeling of a thriller score, like more of a modern thriller score, but it would still be organic to the world, made with instruments. So it just started with a lot of conversations. And then in terms of showing things, I mean, we've had the same process since we were 19 or 20. It's a lot of piano demos. If we're talking about themes and material, it's just I make something, I email an MP3, or nowadays with iPhones, just send a voice note. We just go back and forth a million times talking about it.
And you like that, Damien, getting, his subjectivity on your work. Are you excited when you get Justin's proposals?
Yeah. I mean, I think. It's at this point it's sort of it's something that we don't. I think it's maybe different than, certain other composer-director relationships that I know of, where, for instance, more of the film has been done before music enters the picture, so maybe there's a little bit more of that kind of waiting and anticipation for the interpretation of what the director's done. That's not the case here. Justin's not really interpreting what I've done. If anything, it's a mutual, I might give him some basic indications, whether it's the script or just basic descriptions or whatever, and then he'll run off and do something, and then at a certain point, I'm interpreting what he's done as well. I usually have a big store of his music before I'm even storyboarding or figuring out the shots. So in some sense, the movie itself is an interpretation of what Justin has done, which he then reinterprets in post, And so I think of it a little more as this kind of constant back and forth instead of one of us waiting forever for the other to...
ping pong game, yeah.
It's a constant ping pong game, I would say, from earliest days of the script all the way to the final, yelling at each other on the mix stage when the, movie needs to be done.
Yeah. There is a film I love very much. Basically, it's a commission project, but Damien, you turned it into something quite personal. Play.
Where he joined the thousands who watched an immense television screen as the Apollo touched down on the moon.
First Man, which was presented here, in Venice for the first time. So it's a very private, a very intimate situation, but in a very spectacular location. So how did both of you get the idea to use this specific instrument, the theremin?
I think you suggested it, based on reading that Neil was really into it.
So yeah, I think it began then with Neil. There's this track, Lunar Rhapsody, and that Neil Armstrong was a fan of, and it's a sort of theremin-led kind of then sort of small orchestral track. It's very pretty, but kind of eerie and sort of weird, and I don't know. I think I got into it. Ryan, who plays Neil, got into it. Sent it to Justin, but I don't know. What I really remember. I don't know exactly where the conversation went from there. What I remember most vividly was when Justin then sent back a version of this theme that he'd been working on at that point just on piano, and he sent it back on theremin. Yeah. I think you maybe it was theremin and then piano as a backing with some of this sort of ambient soundscape around it. Very simple, and it was one of those moments as a director you just pray for those moments where the movie just comes to you as clear as day. It just tells you immediately. Before we'd shot a frame of film, exactly what the entire feeling of the movie needs to be, and so. From that moment forward, for whatever the year and a half that passed, it was always about trying to get back to that 1 minute, MP3 that you'd sent.
Yeah, once I actually got a theremin and started playing with it, it was...
Sorry, Justin, could you please maybe first explain what the theremin is and maybe mimic its timbre?
Sure. So, yeah.
Good.
It's like kind of like a a whistle sort of sound between a voice and a whistle. It's a synthesizer that is instead of having a keyboard that triggers the notes, it has two antennae basically. One is for pitch and one is for volume. So when you get further and closer from one, that's volume, or this is the pitch one on the right. And volume is up and down. You have two antennae. One you're going towards, and the other one you're going up and down. It's volume and pitch, volume and pitch. So you play it basically by waving your hands at it. You never touch it, or if you do touch it, basically the sound will go away. You have to be a distance from it, and it's sort of like feeling your magnetic field or whatever it is. So you're kind of waving your hands at it, never touching it. And it's what I loved about it once I started playing with it is how human it felt. Because it's sensing the most subtle movements you're making. So it's really like an extension of your body. And it has that voice quality too. So it just felt like this great intersection between something that was technology, but something that was just so human and could be so heartbreaking and sound like a voice or a solo violin, and it could have all that nuance to it. And yeah, it was just I remember a really big breakthrough once we started playing with it and put that melody, which had been composed on piano, once we put the melody on the theremin. And then the other big is one sort of stretch while we were in pre-production. The two breakthroughs I remember were the theremin, and then how we were going to process the strings. That was the other breakthrough, putting all the violins, violas, cellos, basses through. If you hear it, it's all very shaky. All the strings, they're kind of like quivering. And it was, we put them through a rotor cabinet, which is organs, like B3 organs, Hammond organs, Hammonds. They have these speaker cabinets where the speaker spins inside and it gives it this Doppler effect. But we found we could put strings through it. We could record strings and then send them out through the rotor cabinet with the spinning thing, and that gives them all this shaky quality. So between this sort of fragile quasi-human voice in the theremin and then these shaky strings, it had this really emotional feel, and that was just all through a process of going back and forth with Damien, first at the piano and then trying different instrumentation and production choices.
But Damien, you told me once, if I remember correctly, that it was a huge struggle to impose the theremin timbre to the studio, to the production company. In 2 words.
They tried to fire me from the movie. They actually did over the theremin.
Multiple times.
Multiple times.
Yeah.
They brought in another composer. We had to fend that off.
Yeah. It was. I know. Yeah, it was dicey. It was weirdly the hardest kind of navigating that Just and I ever had to do in terms of within the studio system. Much harder than anything we had to do in Babylon, for instance, in terms of trying to negotiate a studio, was the theremin in this movie. They really just had it. They had a vendetta against this theremin. They were going to kill it.
There was a smaller vendetta against the harp. I remember pushing really hard to make it piano instead of harp.
Really?
For the Armstrongs and all those cues. Oh, yeah.
Oh, the harp.
But the theremin was the real battle.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Next year we will do a special lecture talk about the theremin, if you wish.
Yeah. Well, Justin became very skilled at playing the theremin, so
I can play it. I can record it.
I'm surprised you didn't bring one out.
I can't really play it. I can do take after take after take and edit it together and fix the tuning and all of that. But I mean,
he's selling himself short.
I think like when it comes to the theremin, I think I was taking the notes. I was taking the notes we were hearing because ultimately, like the note behind what they were really telling us is they didn't want the cues to like take us out of the scene. So it was really a process that we had, like getting it mixed right. Like I think we were doing the right thing by using the theremin, of course, but we did have to put a lot of work into how we were going to mix it. And it was sitting in the right place.
And sometimes you do find that, or at least what I really discovered on that shoot, that it seems like other people have gone through is you're editing the whole time mostly with mock-ups these days, And so on the one hand, the ability to create digital mock-ups of stuff is amazing today. It's a thing that really wasn't available as a tool even 10 years ago, let alone 20. But it's such a gap between that and real players getting together on a stage and recording it. And so, you know, if it's a score that's designed to eventually be played by real players, which in this case, for the most part, it was. So, you know, it was also that sort of weird thing where the exact same score with no changes recorded on an actual stage with actual musicians, suddenly it's, you know, I don't know if the studio by then had just given up or if they actually were hearing things differently, you know, and it was sort of, oh, that's so great, you really changed everything. It's great. Well, it's the exact same score that you hated and wanted to fire Justin for, but now it's players playing it instead of a computer plug.
The real musicians helped a lot. And then theremin, I mean, it was the same theremin tracks, but putting those filters on, like when you hear that creator cue, it's very...
So it sits.
Yeah, theremin, if you don't put it, if you just play it without any, you know, it's very bright, very annoying. It's a very annoying sounding instrument. But if you put these filters, you take all the high frequencies out, it takes this very warm quality. So just finding the exact frequency of where it needs to be cut off to, those choices, you know, were kind of evolving and eventually helped it, I think, yes, you know, sit in the right place and give us a really great emotional experience without, it was never annoying like a raw theremin, the raw sound of a theremin.
I don't want to rush you, gentlemen, but we still have 24 clips to watch. No, I'm kidding. You mentioned, Damien, your last film to date, Babylon, and we chose a very specific scene that we're going to discuss. Damien, does this specific scene represent, you know, your intention on the film? I think to bring together many opposites, and especially the trivial and the sublime.
Yeah, I think, I think that was the sort of the initial, or kind of one of the guiding principles through the whole movie, and that Justin and I talked a lot about, was that it had to be this sort of always, it had to be this train that was always kind of falling off the tracks or sort of about to fall off the tracks, or things are tumbling out of it, and yet somehow in that chaos, in that kind of falling apart, there's something occasionally sublime that happens. That to me felt like the best metaphor for, I mean, maybe you could argue filmmaking, period, but certainly filmmaking at that time when it was still in sort of a certain pure, raw state that maybe we've lost a little bit, where you really kind of get down to the essence of chasing the light, chasing against the elements, chasing against the sort of the real world, because films are ultimately a documentary. You're ultimately at the, you know, it's one of the big differences between cinema and the other art forms. You're ultimately at the whim of reality on some level, no matter how much you want to harness it, but you try to kind of harness it and try to sort of pierce through it in some way that feels like you're seeing, you know, like you're seeing God, like you're seeing something sublime. Silent cinema, I think especially, it's as sublime as cinema ever got, and it was as crazed and foul and depraved and debauched as cinema ever got as well. So those two things did collide historically.
Yeah.
I mean, that's an historically accurate thing to say, even if we take that idea to our own extremes. So that became kind of a guiding compass for us, I think. Yeah.
And Justin, you know, about this specific scene, you know, how did you get the idea to use one of the two main themes you've written for the film, and to make a nod to Wagner?
Yeah, well,
Wagner, the composer, not the Russian group.
Yeah, it was obviously temp with Wagner, which we don't do very often at all, use temp music, but this was one scene where we'd shot it to something else just because I guess we didn't have anything, or maybe we thought at one point we were actually going to use the Wagner, so it was shot to that, and then we got to post and we thought, let's do something original here, but, you know, still make it very much homage to, the Liebestod. So we ended up using a tune from the score, the Gold Coast rhythm tune, da dee 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 dee, which has become sort of the Jack theme by this point, but orchestrated very much, you know, like that Wagner cue. So it was kind of an interesting. I remember one of the really challenging things about it was you tempt it with the Wagner, but had made some music edits to extend it. So there were like two little loops in it. So the whole game of that part of Tristan and Isolde is to withhold the resolution. It just keeps withholding. And then they had made music edits to withhold even longer. So I was like, you're taking the piece of music that's most famous for withholding a resolution and making it even longer, and I have to sort of chase that now. So it was a very hard assignment. I had to find ways to just kind of tread while have it still building. It could never feel like it was truly treading water. It had to stay in this place before the resolution, but had to be building. So lots of lines that just kept going up. And
a disguise when you circle back to the bottom of the scale.
Yeah. They would go up, and then lines would come in under it going up, and then more lines coming in. So there were a lot of little counter melodies building on each other, and just lots of little tricks to get it feeling like it was rising without ever stopping for however long it was before you could get to that big chord.
Yeah, and it was also a kind of challenge to be in the period and out of the period, and mainly out of the period from a music point of view. What you played yesterday, for instance, it's not related to the period of the film.
Or the period.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just a combination. It's our tune with that kind of really overblown romantic orchestration.
Yeah. I found out a special document that I think our two friends will appreciate. They look anxious.
Surprises worry me.
I practiced some of those piano pieces 4 hours a day for 3 months, and I should never want to hear them again, but I'm still moved by them.
This one piece of music unites them, and I just loved the idea of introducing the musical theme of the movie that way.
I just heard you play, and I wanted...
Orchestration is my favorite part of the process, finding those colors using the orchestra, whether I was making it melancholy or playful.
Justin wrote such beautiful music, and it's something that people are always going to talk about and remember.
Justin is a musical voice that draws upon history, but comes out in its own language.
Justin and I had always kind of imagined that this would be like a 90-piece orchestra, recorded the old-fashioned way, all together in one room.
It's amazing to be here scoring La La Land on the same stage where they scored Singing in the Rain and all those great MGM musicals.
It was a thing we bonded over when we were college roommates, and it was the pinnacle we were chasing as we were working on music together.
We're so lucky to have his score because it's really special.
Ultimately, the passion with which we wanted to approach the movie, with which we wrote it, with which we composed the music for it, and with which we intended to put it on screen.
Damien, how do you live this key moment, the recording sessions with Justin? You become the spectator of your own movie. How do you live that?
I think that's exactly right. I think I'm mainly a spectator. I'm there to, give notes if I feel that I should, or maybe for the most part to be kind of a sounding board for Justin if there's anything that he wants to kind of test out or is unsure about. But by that point, usually we've lived with this music for so long, and Justin knows what he's doing. So I tend to just kind of stay back once we get to that stage and just watch and enjoy it.
Yeah. And what's the range of reactions you get from Damien at the recording session?
It's a big range. It depends on the kind of music we're doing. If it's orchestral, it's pretty set. But if it's jazz, we're finding a lot of it. So the jazz combo stuff, in La La Land or with Babylon. We had a whole week before we ever shot the movie, a whole week at Capitol with a 13-person band and then a lot of other overdubs like percussion. And yeah, those sessions are a lot more flexible. So
yeah, the pre-records are more, yeah.
We're really going back and forth. We're just, in some cases, there were pieces where we're trying to find the drum grooves or whatever. It's kind of an exploration, or find the right player to play a solo. We'll try one player, try a different player, try to find the right thing. And yeah, it's some things work really well, some things don't. We had some very frustrating moments on the Babylon score, just trying to get the right tone, the right solos. We going back and I remember we had so much trouble getting them to swing the right way on something like Welcome from Babylon. Just it is very small, but it's really important too, getting it to have that feel. We were so focused on making it 20s, but not 220s. I won't go down a whole rabbit hole with this, but that sort of thing where we're listening, and usually it's great, we're very happy, we have small notes, but sometimes it's just not right. It's just wrong, and we have to dial it in, and so sometimes that's a conversation between us, sometimes that's a note coming from Damien, and then I have to deal with it, and say, okay, how do I take that, and what do I have to tell the musicians to get it done differently or right? So all sorts of things can happen.
What's great for me about the recording sessions is if there's a problem, usually Justin has to solve it. So I get to be the one who complains
and be the bad guy.
And then and you have to be the bad guy. Yeah, you're right. So I get to just kind of wave, go, oh, it's so great. Thanks, guys. It sounds amazing.
It can be very awkward sometimes, like if a musician isn't working out and you have to.
But it's only fair because then on shooting, Justin's very annoying when I'm shooting. if there's any music stuff on set, Justin's on set, and he'll be in my ear first thing if there's something not quite right, and then I have to deal with it, and I have to be the bad guy. So I feel like we get to have our vengeance on each other in equal parts.
We still have one last clip to watch, but before, I would like to know if there are some questions among you. Please. Go ahead. We have a microphone for you.
Hello, thank you for being here. Thank you for this conversation. I really appreciate your films and your jobs. And since we're talking about arts, I would like to ask you, what do you think about the idea for young artists to betray their own tastes and follow producers' vision or maybe political trends in order to get a chance to start a career?
In 2 words.
Do not. Just don't. I mean, it's very easier said than done. It's especially when you're starting out, you don't have kind of that much leverage. It can be hard not to find yourself subservient to others' visions, but I think even just forgetting artistic integrity, even from purely a pragmatic standpoint, you have to sort of find what is unique to you, or what you feel is unique to you, or whatever project you're doing, and often that's going to be something that others are trying to talk you out of. I think maybe that was one reason why I think Justin, early on, I was such an admirer, and just kind of felt like that was a wagon I wanted to sort of jump on, is that I've never met anyone more stubborn than Justin, and able to really just kind of stick to a vision despite daunting odds where most people would buckle. There were lots of steps along the road of all these movies that we've shown, just from a musical standpoint, where a lot of voices were in Justin's head trying to tell him to go one way, and he didn't.
Yeah, that happens, and I am very stubborn when it comes to we stick to our guns, but I think it's also really important to listen to everybody, listen to every note, listen to every voice, and then try to filter it and take what's smart and ignore what's stupid. And most of it you won't take, but there's always some truth in it. So we were talking about the studio wanted to get rid of the theremin, wanted to get rid of me. I listened to everything. I listened to what everybody says, all the comments at the screenings with the studio executives, and I try to say, okay, what's the truth? Is there any truth behind this, and what is it? And it might be something very different than what they're telling you to do, but like I said, in that case, it was, okay, maybe I'll try a slightly different filter setting on the theremin and mix it a little differently, and that put it in a better place for all of us. So, yeah, I think listen to everybody, but stay true to, you have to know you have to have that North Star and know what you're sticking to, but then try to figure out if there are any bits of truth that you can take to make the work better.
Okay, Monsieur?
I think this is on, yeah. So talking about compromise, what was for each of you, the one where you went, okay, I can do that. I can compromise that one. You're the biggest one you remember for each of you. Where like, okay, I'm going to give Justin that, or okay, Damien, for each of you.
Compromising a disagreement between us, or coming from a studio or from somebody else?
Between you, where you're like, okay, I'm going to go with that. Because you got to compromise at some point.
Usually gets to a point where one of us storms off the mix stage, and then
it's always at the mix stage. We have our biggest fights at the mix by far.
La La Land, it was like a cymbal on a drum, and Babylon, it happened a few times.
Yeah.
And then I don't know where obviously once one person has walked off the mix stage, then something has to, then there's no one's mixing until there's but I don't know how we've finally, I don't know what our treaties have been.
But I mean, both of you brings a critical eye on a fresh eye on the work of the other.
Yeah. Sometimes we try to get past these things by sort of planning contingencies. Like I remember we had the two biggest fights we had in La La Land were the cymbal, which was just kind of an A or B choice. There was really no solution for that. But the other big fight I remember was what note the trumpet was going to rip up to at the end of Planetarium. Mm-hmm. And I had one note, and you wanted a different note, and we couldn't agree. We had a big fight in the editing room. So what we ended up doing was I charted both notes as the note I wanted and then the option, and we said we're going to get them both on the recording stage. It's called like a stripe or a cue. We had the main orchestration, and then as a stripe, we just got the other note, and then we could sort it out later. But at least we were covered.
Okay.
I bet you won.
I did win that one.
Yeah.
But I didn't. But what's great is I think what's great about our partnership is neither one ever forces the other one into something that the other is happy with. Like we want the other. Like we really want. I never want him to be unhappy with something. He never wants me to be unhappy with something. So we always work it out. We always look for that option C if we're fighting over A or B. In that case, it kind of really was A or B, but Damien came around to the other note, and it was when a real musician played it, which so often happens. Mm-hmm. Like we were talking earlier, it's one thing in a mock-up, and it's very different when a musician plays it. So we couldn't agree in virtual instrument mock-up land. We had a big fight, and then we recorded both notes, and when Damien heard, I think we actually never recorded the second note, because you heard the note that was orchestrated, and he said, oh, that actually works really well. Mm. But we were willing to keep exploring it till we were both satisfied.
We have just the time for 2 more questions, but you have to answer in 1 minute. Okay. I mean 30 seconds for each of you. Go ahead.
Hello, huge fan for your work. I have a question for Damien. How do you start writing? What's your starting point usually when you get the inspiration?
Once I get the inspiration, then it's. Often it does start with music before I'm even sort of writing anything. Sometimes it's music from Justin. Sometimes it's just a sort of wide array of I'll kind of put together a playlist or something. They'll wind up being pieces of music that don't even inform what Justin does at all, but it just helps get me started on the writing process, sets a kind of soundscape. And then Justin, usually I think when Justin and I go from just talking about the music to him actually composing stuff is usually as soon as there's a script. I think with La La Land it was before the script for obvious reasons, but it was like, a treatment or something like that.
Mm. Yeah, La La Land is the only one where I was working from a treatment, I think, because it was a musical. So I started a little earlier, but usually I get a script read it, and then we just start breaking down the script. Where's their music? Where's their not?
Yep.
Start coming up with themes at the piano, then sounds with virtual instruments before we record anything.
Yep.
Storyboards. That's always a fun process. Damien, either you still do hand, you still draw them yourself?
Yeah.
Yeah, hand-drawn storyboards, and then I'm writing music to that, and he's editing animatics to the music, and I'm changing the music to fit the animatics, and back and forth until it's just sort of fitting.
Yeah.
Okay, a very last question and a quick answer, please.
Hi, Damien. Hi, Justin. I'm Federico from Bocconi TV, and I want to first to thank you for the words and the ideas that you shared. And since you're in Italy, has opera inspired you to sail in new musical adventures, or have you already set your mind and set your sail towards other seas?
Yes.
I don't know. I think the real answer is I'm not entirely sure what I'm doing next, so I'm open to all seas. And I love opera. Obviously, opera, to some extent, even if just indirectly, has informed a lot of what Justin and I have done, the same way it informed Umbrellas of Cherbourg in its own completely, indirect way. So, and obviously, yeah, Justin was just referencing, Wagner opera that he pulled from for this, so yeah.
I will say to suck up to the Italians here, the Nina Rota scores were a huge conversation between us on
Early
Babylon.
on. But even, yeah, and that was also some of the first scores I sent you.
We talked, La Dolce Vita was the biggest inspiration for a lot of that score, and 8.5 we talked about a lot.
Yep, yeah.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, but we must end this talk, but we would like to end it with a last clip. And we were talking about what we call in French plan séquence. Damien learned me the English word, oneer.
Oneer, yeah, is what you kind of call it in Holly, in sort of industry terms. But yeah, just long shot, just a shot with no cuts.
Yeah. And you know that 10 years ago in cinema schools, when it came to oneer, long shots, the students studied the opening of touch of Evil. And now, for a few years, they study that opening scene, which will be the ending scene of this Cartier Mostra talk.